Well, welcome back after about 6 weeks off for those of us here on site. For those that are watching this on the seminars on the internet, you just saw the last weeks and now we're here. But we here have actually taken the month of December off because of the holidays, and we're beginning again. I think this is episode number 9 totally, but we're ready for chapter 8 this evening. And so we pass that out to you here. Those of you that are watching, perhaps by the grace of God, within a year from now, we'll have this in a printed form and maybe available on Amazon.com, so you can check it out there. This is January the 6th, 2020. So somewhere 5 months, 6 months, 10 months from now, you might check and see if the written material has come into pass. And I need to call to all of our attention that are here tonight that this is Richard Yeager's birthday. In fact, I believe he was invited to a birthday dinner to celebrate, and he said, "No, I've got to go tape some seminars tonight." So God bless you, Richard, for being here and for coming. And we wish you many more years, my friend, many years, many years. It's probably appropriate, since we have a sense of coming back together after being off for a while, and as we start the brand new year, to remind ourselves, or at least for me to remind you, of how grateful I am that you're here, and that you have chosen to come and have asked to come, in the sense you've asked that we see if there's anything to talk about on Monday nights. And so I wanted to share just a few sentences from Maximus the Confessor that have always guided me for the last several years that we've been doing this on tape. And I think I need to remind us as we start the new year of these things. It is a bold step, the undertaking to wrestle with matters far beyond my own powers. To grapple with the issues we grapple with is quite staggering. And I should remind you, as Maximus reminds all of us, that we should not take what I say as definitive, as a spiritual interpretation of the passages in question, for I'm very far from the mind and meaning of the divine words, with respect to which I need to be taught by others. And just a couple more. He just intersperses these as he goes along. In one place, he says, "This is how I understand the topic, the passage in question, according to the best of my abilities. Whoever is able to understand these words in a loftier manner would bring joy both to himself and to me, setting forth the meaning of what has been written more richly than I have done. For I have said that the word of the divine scriptures is always unlimited, whereas it limits all those who speak about it. It itself is not limited by the speakers in any way whatsoever. And thus, even if I have said something that has hit the mark of truth, and even if such a thing were reckless on my part, I have nonetheless not encompassed all the meaning of the things that have been written, for this is infinitely beyond my capacity." And then finally, I think it's appropriate to share a prayer that he interspersed as kind of a prayer for us as we begin this year, continue our studies together, begin part 2 tonight. "Come, O all hymned word of God, and give us in the degree commensurate to us the revelation of your own words. Remove the thickness of the veils that cover them, and show us, O Christ, the beauty of their inner meanings. Take us by our right hand, that is, the intellective powers within us, and guiding us in the way of your commandments, lead us to the place of your wondrous tabernacle, unto the very house of God, with a voice of rejoicing and confession, so that through confession manifested in practice, and through joy realized in contemplation, we too may be counted worthy to come to the ineffable place of your feasting, and join our voices of praise to those who spiritually keep festival, singing with the silent voices of the intellect the praises of the knowledge of the unutterable mysteries. And forgive me, O Christ, and have mercy on me, for at the request of your servants I have recklessly dared to attempt things beyond my power, and enlighten my unenlightened mind for the contemplation of the questions now before us, so that you may be glorified even more, for giving light to eyes that were blind, and articulate speech to a tongue that was mute. Amen. We enter now then into part 2. We have been discussing paradise has 2 trees. And so we start almost afresh with part 2, the tree that was not chosen. We spent our time together in the fall looking at the tree that was chosen. The world that got created based on the knowledge of good and evil. And so we come now to look at the other tree. There were 2 trees in paradise, and so we now look at the tree not chosen. Brings us to chapter 8, back to the beginning again. In part 1, we step back to our beginning, to a time prior to this world. And by this world, I don't mean just a geographical hunk of dirt floating in space. We mean the understanding of what a world is based on good and the knowledge of good and evil, that identity that we share. To a time prior to this world, teaching us the knowledge of good and evil, prior to this world teaching us its version of knowledge. Having stepped outside this world and having seen this world for what it is, and having unmasked the teacher, as Dorothy unmasked the wizard hidden behind the curtain in Oz, we have returned to our port, to our home base, to our starting point. We're taking our day excursions, if you remember, so we've come back home after the first little trip. We return different than when we began. Somehow, without knowing how, we entered into a domain which our habits of thought do not make immediately accessible to us. It's not our normal way of thinking, the way we're thinking about stuff. By stepping out of the only world we know, the only way of knowing right and wrong, good and evil, we called into question the singular interpretation of the world. This world has taught us. Having discovered the truth about this world, the world we know, we ask ourselves whether there was an alternative world with an alternative way of knowing and living. Is there any other way to live except by the knowledge of good and evil? Taken as a whole, we come now to the second half of the journey. For those of you joining us for the first time tonight, welcome. And this will be a self-contained journey. I'm just making the segue from the first journey we took to this one. Seen separately, we come now to this second journey. On our first journey, we stepped outside this present world to the time prior to this present world existing. Again, not as a hunk of dirt in space, but the world created because we chose the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This second journey we begin this evening not only asks us to step outside this present world, back before this present world existed, this second journey requires us to step outside ourselves. Who were we before this world taught us and told us who we are? Who were we before this world made us who we are? What is the account of our own origin and the origin of this world in which we live? Let us again go back to the beginning, our own beginning, before we were taught, before we learned our habit, our way of thinking, not only about this world, but more importantly, before we learned our present way of thinking about ourselves. Is there another habit of thinking, a different way of understanding who we are? Let us seek to return to the beginning, to the birth of meaning itself. Let us return to the moment before the choice was made of the two trees, before the deadly fruit was eaten. Let us discover who these people are, standing before the tree, making their choice. Let us step outside ourselves that we might discover who we are and why we are here in the first place. So, the beginning of the beginning. Reminds me of Churchill's famous words after the D-Day invasion. He said, "This is not the end, nor is it the beginning of the end, but it is the end of the beginning." Well, this is not the end of the beginning for us. This is the beginning of the beginning for us, stepping back to that very moment. Genesis 1:26. I've got it there in Greek for the simple reason at some point we need to at least know what we're talking about. That I'm not inventing this stuff, and it's there to be discovered. We don't have to learn Greek, but you can at least recognize underneath it the English word and know it's connected with that Greek term. The sequence is the sequence that the Greek is written in. We'll make it into our English sequence in just a second. And said the God, "Let us make man according to the icon, our icon, and according to likeness. And made God the man according to the icon of God, made him, male and female made them." Well, a smoother translation would say, "And God said, let us make man according to our icon." That's the Greek word. The English word for that would be image. We can use the word icon. It's a better word, don't you think? It doesn't have the connotations that the word English image does. Let us make man according to our icon and according to our likeness. And God made man according to the icon of God, and male and female made them. The beginning confronts us with the mystery, the plurality and singularity of the one who is. Let us speaks of plurality, plural. Image speaks of singularity. It's image, singular, as does the term likeness. There is plurality within the single image. From the beginning, the one who is plurality within singularity. The term God refers to its singularity. The term Trinity refers to its plurality. If there was only singularity, Genesis would say, "Let me make man in my image." If there was only plurality, Genesis would say, "Let us make man in our images." But Genesis says, "Let us," plural, "make man in our," that's a plural term, "image," which is singular. We shall have more to say about this later. Well, what is our purpose in the beginning? The plurality agreed to create humanity according to their image and likeness. But when the us, that's the us of Genesis 1:26, let us, when the us created humanity, humanity was only created with the image, with the icon. Nothing is said about being created in the likeness in verse 127. And God made man according to the icon of God, male and female made him. I showed you the Greek a while ago. You can go back and see the word for likeness in 126 and see that it's not there in 127. Origen, writing in 220 AD, said, "Now the fact that he said he made him in the image of God and was silent about the likeness points to nothing else but this, that man received the honor of God's image in his creation, whereas the completion of God's likeness was reserved for him at the consummation. The purpose of this," I'm still quoting Origen, "the purpose of this was that man should acquire the likeness, for himself by his own earnest efforts to imitate God, so that while the possibility of attaining completion was given to him, mankind, in the beginning, through the honor of the image, he should in the end, through the accomplishment of these works, obtain for himself the completed likeness." Or, Diadochos of Photiki put it this way, "All men are made in God's image, but to be in his likeness is granted only to those who through great love have brought their own freedom into subjection to God. For only when we do not belong to ourselves do we become like him who through love has reconciled us to himself. No one achieves this, the likeness, unless he persuades his soul not to be distracted by the false glitter of this life." And St. Gregory of Nyssa made the purpose of our humanity quite clear. Made the purpose of humanity quite clear. "Let us make man in our image after our likeness. We possess the one by creation. We acquire the other by free will. In the first structure, it is given us to be born in the image of God. By free will, there is formed in us the being in the likeness of God. Let us make man in our image. Let him possess by creation what is in the image, but let him also become according to the likeness. God has given the power for this. It is proper that one part is given you, while the other has been left incomplete. This is so that you might complete it yourself, and might be worthy of the reward which comes from God. I should just tell aside that the English translation, influenced by Protestant translations in English, the verse where Jesus says, "Be perfect like your Father in heaven is perfect," the Greek word translated perfect is the Greek word to complete, the finished product. If something is finished, it would be perfect. You can't add any more to it, but be completed. Complete the job, complete the task for which you are created, to become like the image of God you have in you. Christ is reminding us of who we are by creation. He's not telling us to be perfect in some absolute, score a perfect 10 if we're a ice skater or a gymnast or whatever. No, complete. Be about the job, the task in our lives of completing, becoming like the icon of God we carry in us. So it is a question of destiny. The issue of image and likeness is of great importance. Not only are the two separate terms different, which is significant in itself, and which we must consider each likeness and image separately, but that we are given one in our creation and are given the other to achieve and acquire on our own is mind-boggling. We are now at the beginning of our beginning. Why is there life in the first place? Why is human life different from all other life? Why are we here? That is, why are we alive in the first place? What is our purpose? What is our destiny? The question of the destiny of our lives is very serious, as it concerns the most important question for mankind. For what purpose are we placed on the earth? It is in finding the answer to this question that mankind finds his true destiny. It is only from the perspective of our true destiny that we find answers to the particular questions that arise in our daily life. In our relationships with our fellow men, in our studies, our profession, our marriages, and the bearing and rearing of children, if we do not relate correctly to this basic issue, then we will also fail in life's particular purposes. For what meaning can a particular purpose have if human life as a whole has no meaning? I can just see our eyes already glazing over. You see, we've had 6 weeks off. We've watched a lot of television, football games, imbibed, had some eggnog, second pieces of pie, maybe a third piece, Christmas candy, Christmas cookies. That's why there's so many ads on television about losing weight and exercising, always in January, right? To make us feel guilty for having celebrated so joyously in December. So, I'm at least cognizant, without making us feel guilty, wow, this is heavy stuff to come back to. We needed a little slower slope It's just like trying to climb vertically right off the bat. So we'll take it as slowly as we can this evening and be aware that this is stuff to think about. Image and likeness, therefore, reconsidered. Genesis chapter 1, 26 and 27. And God said, let us make man according to our icon and according to our likeness. And God made man according to the icon of God, male and female made them. Genesis 1:26 makes clear that the Creator's plan has two parts: for mankind to be in the image, icon of God, and for mankind to be made in the likeness of God. In implementing that plan, verse 26 mentions that the first part of the plan, been in the image, I should say 27. That is a mistake. It refers to, it's 20. In implementing the plan, verse 27 mentions that the first part of the plan, being made in the image, has been done. It is significant that in verse 27, nothing is said about likeness. Some will suggest that likeness is implied. Yet to say according to the icon is not the same as saying according to the homoousia, the likeness. The plan for humanity was to be created in the icon and the likeness of the Creator. Therefore, it is necessary that the human come into being according to the image and according to the likeness. Both parts are to be accomplished. The Creator accomplished the first part. What is the meaning of the text silence then in verse 27? St. Basil the Great makes the answer quite clear. By our creation we have the first, and by our free choice we build the second. In our initial structure co-originates and exists our coming into being according to the image of God. By free choice, we are conformed to that which is according to the likeness, our free choice of God. And this is what is according to free choice. The power exists in us, but we bring it about by our activity. We have the power to become like God, but we have to do it. We have to take our free will and say yes, and then we have to begin to behave like the likeness, behave like the icon in our activity, in the living of our lives. We have been created in the image. We have also been created with the power under our control to become like God. If He had not given us the power to become according to the likeness, we could not become like God by our own power and authority. We can't invent this. We can't do it by our own power and authority. You know, yet now He has made us with the power to become like God. We have been given the power and the authority to be an iconographer, to make ourselves into a living icon, a living image of the icon of God within us. In giving us the power to become like God, He lets us be artisans of the likeness to God, so that the reward for the work would be ours. I'm quoting St. Basil. It is not the painting, but the painter who is praised over the quality of their work. When you see an icon exactly shaped like the prototype, you do not praise the icon, you marvel at the iconographer. That's all true, right? We have artisans in our church. We marvel at their skill to have created the painting. We have an iconographer in the church. We marvel at her skill to have created that icon. It is the artisan that we praise. St. Basil is saying, God has given us the power to be the artisan of our own icon, the image like the image, the likeness. Here's the prototype we carry in us. Okay, you get the point. Had God done both parts of the plan, if He had created us both in His image and in His likeness, like all the rest of creation, we would be completed and a reflection solely of His glory, the Creator. But in an unfathomable creativity, the Creator has given the authority and power, the privilege and honor of achieving the likeness for ourselves. He has shared the marvel of artisanship, of craftsmanship with us, so that the marvel may become mine, ours, and not another's. He has left it to me, to us, to become according to the likeness of God. This is the meaning hidden in the silence of Genesis 1:27. Let him have by his creation that which is according to the image. Let him also come to be according to the likeness. For this God gave the power. If He created you also according to the likeness, what would be yours to give? Through what would you be crowned? For if the fashioner gave you the whole of it, how would the kingdom of heaven be open to you? But now the one is given, the other is left incomplete, that you may complete yourself and become worthy of the recompense by God. Wow. That's mind-boggling. This is mind-boggling. Then what does the image mean? Now that we have entered into the mystery of the silence of Genesis 1:27, now that we understand that image does not mean likeness, nor does likeness mean image, now that we understand image is given and likeness is achieved, let us ask, what is this image that has been given to us? Again, St. Basil the Great anticipates our question. In what sense are we according to the image of God in the first place? Let us purify ourselves of an ill-informed heart and uneducated conception about God. If we came into being according to the image of God, some say God is of the same shape of ourselves. There are, I think it's missing in your text maybe, there are eyes in God and ears, a head, hands, a behind on which to sit. For it says in Scripture that God sits. You might try Psalm 46:9. Feet with which to walk. So is God not like this, with arms and hands and feet? Put away from your heart unseemly fantasies, St. Basil says, expel from your reason things not in accord with the greatness of God. God is without structure and simple. Do not imagine a shape in regard to him. Do not diminish the great one in a Jewish way. Do not enclose God in bodily concepts, nor circumscribe him according to your own mind. Do not conceive a shape. God is understood from his power, from the simplicity of his nature, not greatness in size. He is everywhere and surpasses all, and he is intangible, invisible, who indeed escapes your grasp. He is not circumscribed by size, nor encompassed by shape, nor measured by power, nor enclosed by time, nor bounded by limits. Nothing is with God as it is with us. In other words, we should not be thinking about God in human terms at all. For example, one of the early monastic fathers, Evagrius of Pontus, taught in order for prayer to be effective, not only the passions, but any picturing in the imagination, even picturing of the divine, must be suppressed, for mental images only lead to delusion. When you pray, do not form images of the divine within yourself, nor allow your mind to be impressed with any form, but approach the immaterial immaterially, and you will come to understanding. Blessed is the mind which becomes immaterial and free from all things during the time of prayer. Wow. We thought we got full over Christmas. The one who is has no body, has no shape, and has no visibleness. There's no correlation between the one who has no body with the human body. Having the image of God in us has nothing to do with our having a body. Nor does being made in the image of God and having a body imply that the one who is has a body similar to ours. Having the image of God in us has nothing to do with our bodily shape. Simply put, what can be known by humans about the one who is that the one who is transcends knowability. We can know his unknownness. That's why we like the word mystery. We know that the one who is unknowable, except for that which he chooses to reveal, chooses to make knowable to us. The one who is not a being, even a supreme being, but transcends being and all beings. He who is more than ineffable and more than unknowable. Are you getting the idea here? Not just size. We're not talking size. It's beyond knowledge, beyond expression, beyond words, beyond description, beyond. He is more than ineffable, more than unknowable. Human words cannot contain him. No name can define him. The one who is incomprehensible, unlimited by time and space, and infinite. God has no where. For God is not somewhere, but is unqualifiedly beyond all where. Well, I can't comprehend that. Yeah, that's where we start. That's who we're talking about. The one we can't comprehend, creating us and placing His image, whatever that is, in us. It's a whole nother world then. He's got a body like I got a body. You get, okay. Since the one who is has no body and is not limited by time and space, what does it mean that we are created in His image? How then shall we search out that which in us is according to the image? We shall pursue this question further in our discussion of completing the likeness. We're going to spend some time, as you can tell, small chunks of time. Thank God. Who told you that you were naked? For the moment, our discussion of image and likeness, with the image being given and the likeness for us to achieve, leads us to examine a different question. We have to ask this question. The serpent lied when he slandered the one who is. We dealt with this in the last journey, by saying that the one who is was afraid that Adam and Eve would become gods if they ate of the tree from which they were not to eat. Adam and Eve were not created to be gods within creation, to exercise a certain superiority over the rest of creation. They were, however, to become like God, that is, like the image they bore within them. The one who is was not threatened by Adam and Eve becoming gods. He knew that by becoming godettes, Adam and Eve would not fulfill their destiny and therefore would not achieve the purpose for which they were created. Adam and Eve settled for being godettes in their own world rather than becoming like God in His world. When God found them, Adam had explained that he and Eve were hiding because they were naked, to which God responded, "Who told you that you were naked?" Who told you is thus the question. It's the question God asked. Who are we listening to? What book are we reading? What Bible study are we attending? Who do we follow on the social media? Darth Vader was correct. Luke, you must accept your destiny. However, Luke's destiny was not the destiny that Vader offered him. It makes all the difference who it is telling us what our destiny is. Our destiny is not the destiny the serpent offered. It makes all the difference to whom we're listening. There is a difference between being made in the image and the likeness, where both are completed in mankind already, versus being made in the image and given the power to achieve the image by completing the likeness within us. Likewise, there is a difference between thinking of God as a glorified, super, larger-than-life human versus realizing that the one who is ineffably beyond all thought conceivable by us, In the first instance, God can be pictured and described. In the latter, the one who is remains a mystery to be worshiped. You see, it's a real choice. Tree of life versus the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It is a choice between the image has been given and the likeness is to be achieved by us, versus both the image and the likeness are already given to us. It is a choice between the human body not being a mirror of the Creator, or the human body is a mirror of the Creator. It is a real choice between listening to the one who is versus listening to the serpent. The choices are not theoretical. The choices are real. They lead to different realities, the same as the choice between the trees in paradise leads to different worlds. We only have to consider how the ancient Greeks and Romans pictured the physical relationship of their gods and goddesses with themselves. And you've got some pictures there. You've got a statue of Aphrodite, one of Apollo, one of Hera, one of Poseidon, just as examples that are there. The ancient Greeks and Romans had gods and goddesses in human forms. The technical term is anthropomorphic deities, deities with human bodies and human attributes enlarged. Deities are understood as larger than life, superhuman type deities. Now consider how the Christianity of the West understood and pictured the Christian God. And there you have one of the most famous pictures of all Renaissance Christian West ever, by Michelangelo, The Creation of God, by Adam on the Sistine Chapel's ceiling. Known as The Creation of Adam, the painting by Michelangelo on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican in Rome. The painting is as anthropomorphic as the ancient gods of the Greeks and Romans. The pre-Christian, and we're not arguing about the skill of the artist. We're not diminishing, we're talking about the content of what's being portrayed. God is done like a human. Adam is done like a human, as he should be, and the two are identical. One is pointing to the other. The pre-Christian and the Christian West have the same identical anthropomorphic understanding of their deity. The only difference is the medium, whether the deity was carved out of marble or painted with paint. Do you see it? They're identical. The comments of the psalmist apply equally to the pre-Christian and the Christian West. The idols of the nations are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have a mouth, but they shall not speak. They have ears, but they shall not hear. They have noses, but they shall not smell. They have hands, but they shall not feel. They have feet, but they shall not walk. They have no sound in their throat, for neither is their breath in their mouth. May those who made them become like them, and all who trust them. There is no real difference between anthropomorphic depictions of deity, whether in a painting or carved in stone. Those who make them as well as those who trust in them, become like them. Become as dead and lifeless as statues and paintings, because man has created his gods in his own image. In the image of man, he has created his gods. It makes a difference to whom we're listening. Western culture before, with, and after Christianity has its anthropomorphic gods made in the image of Western culture. Western culture invented an anthropomorphic Christian God that the Enlightenment and modern science would replace with their real God, Homo Deus, man himself. Nietzsche announced the death of the West anthropomorphic God in the 1880s. The psalmist announced the death of those who manufactured gods in their own image 3,000 years before Nietzsche. It makes all the difference to whom we're listening. Let us turn aside. Let us hear the still, small voice of the one who is, the one who created us in his image and gave us the destiny to become like him. Wow. I think it's time for a break. Thank you for those that brought some goodies back there. I know Margaret's made us coffee. My wife is missing tonight. She's home with pneumonia, and so she's not here to be part of us. Thank God for those that have helped out and pitched in all the ways that you have. So let's take a break, and we'll come back in a little bit like always. Thanks. If we were to kind of summarize what we just experienced, we might say that first of all, there is a difference between image and likeness. We may not know what the difference is, but we know there is a difference. They are not identical. We should know that. Secondly, we are created with the image of God in us and created with the power and the purpose, or for the purpose, to become like God, like the image in us. And then, thirdly, if I put it down here, you can't see it, but thirdly, God doesn't have a body. Just to summarize the total mystery, the unknowability. We could probably meditate on all of that for the rest of the month. We wouldn't know any more than we know right now, but we just know that we don't know it. To let that begin to soak in. It has been said coming along through the last several years of doing this, particularly when we did the Gospel of John, that many times our plate got full within the first 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and we just kind of stopped listening as we went on with the rest of the session. That was because we had some sort of timetable to try to get through in 2 years, and before we all grew so old we wouldn't make it. We don't have that kind of urgency here. Our first night back, we're still getting in shape. It was nice to have a little extra time to kind of chat and catch up with folks we haven't seen over the holidays. That was good, because we're not just here as isolated students, we're here as part of a family together. And so I thought, if our plate is already full, that we will save the next chapter until next week. A Christmas play in 3 acts. Act 1. Why are you here? The lady asked. Blanche Farha was not hostile. She was perplexed. Why would a Baptist preacher and his wife want to come to St. Elijah Orthodox Church? What did we have that he didn't already have? That was 30 years ago. I'm going to throw in a footnote at this point that Blanche asked the question, and she was very friendly. She was one of the first to welcome us. The first was Joe. He's not here tonight, and Jill, Joe and Jill Andrews, the first ones to say hello to us. And then there was Ruth Albert and Albert Sleem, and they're all gone except Joe and Jill. The rest are now deceased. That was 30 years ago. I suspect there were those in Bethlehem who wondered the same thing when they saw the Magi arrive at the barnyard cave. I mean, what was the big deal about a woman having a baby? The shepherds had come, but they were locals. Maybe they needed something from the barn. But the Magi, they were as out of place in Bethlehem as a Baptist preacher at St. Elijah, Eastern Orthodox Church in Oklahoma City. So why did they come? The short answer is simple. There is something in this cave. There is something at an Orthodox church that cannot be found anywhere else. That seems like such a silly answer. Haven't you seen a baby before? Have you never seen a cave? What's the big deal? Don't you have your own building, your own churches? Have you come because of the icons, the beards, the clergy in black, the incense? Why are you here? The Magi had followed a star. We had followed the transformed countenance of a man who had found the cave, a man who had stumbled upon St. Elijah. We had met Woody and Carla a few years earlier. He was following a star he could not see, looking for what he did not know and couldn't say. There was no peace inside him, no calm assurance. Driven by a restlessness that forced him onward, he kept moving, kept searching, and kept seeking. It had been over a year since we had last seen them. Out of the blue, we bumped into them at Quail Springs Mall. A light I had never seen shone from his face. He was covered in peace. You know, that peace on earth, goodwill toward men kind of peace. It was there all over him. It was the kind of peace that passes all understanding kind of peace. What has happened to you? I blurted out, stumped, amazed, perplexed. "I found the church," he replied. Act 2. "If I get you a scholarship, would you like to take the St. Stephen's course?" Father Constantine asked me. I was still a Baptist preacher. It had been a year or so since we had come to the Inquirer's class at St. Elijah. We came when guest speakers spoke. With 6 children and a 7th on the way, it was difficult to sort through the theological and practical financial issues if we were to convert. Being willing to learn, I said yes to Father Constantine and enrolled in the St. Stephen's course. I wrote my exam essays at the end of the first semester. The exam questions required by Father Joseph Allen most intrigued me of all of the ones that were asked, especially the first question. Discuss the doctrine of deification or theosis. What does this doctrine tell you about man and creation? What is the importance of synergia in this process? I had no idea what any of this meant. I made a decision that I would not fight the answer or argue with it. Not only was I interested in what the answer was, but I was most intrigued with seeing whether or not I could actually discover the answers to the question. Well, the questions answered and submitted, Hannah born at Thanksgiving, Christmas celebrated, and the New Year begun, I received my graded essays from all the professors. There, at the bottom of the last page, Father Joseph had written, "Keep up the good work. Don't quit. It takes discipline." I did not enroll in second semester. I knew I was in trouble. There was no need to learn more stuff. If everything I had written in the essay was the truth, then I was in trouble. The Orthodox Church offered an understanding of a loving God who created mankind for the express purpose of becoming like God. Adam and Eve rejected God's purpose with the result that God had become man in order to restore mankind back to our original purpose. God became man so that man could become once more like God. Who knew? This gospel was light years away from the angry God condemned to hell, praying when going to sleep, not to die before you wake kind of gospel I knew. 29 years ago, in January 1991, I resigned being a Baptist preacher. It wasn't a choice between churches. It was a choice of which gospel. I finally knew why there was a baby in the cave at Bethlehem. I finally knew why I was born. I finally knew the reason I was here and the purpose of my life. To behave like the God who became a man, to show how mankind is to live, and if necessary, how to die for those who hate us. I was at peace. Act 3. The inside is larger than the outside. C.S. Lewis, The Last Battle in the Chronicles of Narnia. Of all the scenes in all the books in the Chronicles of Narnia, this scene near the end of the final book, The Last Battle, remains vividly implanted in my memory 40 years later. The king of Narnia is surrounded by enemy forces. In the midst of the battle, he seeks refuge in a shed. When he bursts through the door, he discovers the inside of the shed is larger than the world outside the shed. My copy of the book still has marks in the margin, noting the spots commenting on the inside being larger than the outside. I'm quoting a few. It seems then that the stable scene from within and the stable scene from without are two different places. Yes, its inside is bigger than its outside. Yes, in our world too, a stable once had something inside it that was bigger than our whole world. I never forgot the scene or those words, the inside is larger than the outside. Mentally, I could understand the concept, but I really didn't understand what it meant. Not, that is, until 11 years later when I fought my battle, crashed through the door, and discovered the inside of the stable is larger than the outside. I experienced for myself that what is on the inside is greater than what is on the outside of the stable. With those in Narnia, we confessed, I have come home at last. This is my real country. I belong here. This is the land I've been looking for all my life, though I never knew it till now. It has taken 29 years to understand what it meant to stop after one semester of the St. Stephen's course and decide the truth of the matter. I realize now what I didn't realize then. We only know what we are willing to live. Everything else is merely academic information. Without realizing it, like those in Narnia we read so many years before, we were drawn further up and further in. For 29 years we have explored the inside of this cave that somehow turned itself inside out, surrounded and diminished everything that was once outside, that once seemed so large and important. The cave is far bigger than it was outside. Of course it is. The further up and the further in you go, the bigger everything gets. The inside is larger than the outside. Hyperbole, exaggeration, overactive imagination, or reality. Narnia's shed and the west stable is the church's cave in Bethlehem. The Katakian for Oikos, for the Nativity, the Christmas Eve service, we said, Bethlehem has opened for all. Come and let us take possession of the paradise that is within the cave. We thank God for that star-like couple we followed to the cave in Bethlehem. I thank God for Kathy, who walked beside me when we went inside. And we thank God for St. Elijah, who has welcomed us, put up with us, tolerated our childlike naivete over the inexpressible ineffableness, speechless without words of the experience of the paradise inside the cave. Why are we here? This is why. The inside is larger than the outside. We have been adopted. We have been grafted in. You have become our aunts and uncles, our brothers and sisters, our cousins. You have become grandparents to our children. The inside is 100 times larger than the outside we left behind. So Merry Christmas and God's blessing physically and spiritually in the new year. With our love, Deacon Ezra and Kathy. So that's where we'll stop tonight, and God bless you, and we'll show up next week and see what the next chapter has for us. Thank you.